is reality TV just like the new circus?
Yes.
And yes.
I'm so excited about our film today. We are talking about the award-winning documentary, The Tallest Dwarf from Independent Lens. It's an eye-opening film that follows director Julie Forrest Wyman in her search for belonging in the little person community.
The film really challenges the way little people have been stereotyped and even fetishized in pop culture. It's asking some complicated and profound questions like, what does it mean to be fully seen? What does it mean to feel good in your body? And do you need to change your body to feel accepted?
Right, and to help us unpack all of that, we have two amazing guests, Pete Montingo and Mark Pavanelli, who's actually featured in the film. I'm excited to dive deeper into this conversation. I'm Lucky Wynn.
And I'm Marissa Pina. Welcome to PBS Film Club, where we leave you just a little bit smarter with our films.
Pete, Mark, thank you so much for being here today. We're excited to talk to you and have this conversation with y'all, to get your perspectives on this film. But before we get to that, Marissa and I were preparing for this, and in the film we learned that there are over 400 different types of dwarfism, which blew our mind. We had no idea. But that has something to do with how you two met already, right?
Yeah, Pete's type of dwarfism is very rare.
Oh, God, in another life? No.
Well, I mean, you probably can tell us better, but we met through your sister, who is a little person, and she was is friends with my wife, who is also a little person, and they have the same type of dwarfism. And Pete was bringing her over to our house for, I think she was asking Heather, my wife, about potential surgery she was going to have or something to that effect.
Yeah, this was a while ago.
I mean, you were a young man.
Yeah, I was, and I still am. Thank you. Yeah, and I know, just growing up in Little People of America, which is, the community for little people, I'm sure, we crossed paths a million times.
Sure.
You had mentioned, Pete, that Mark had also helped you cast for some of your productions, right? Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so I had a book that was coming out a few years ago called Little Imperfections, a tall tale of growing up different, and it's basically about my perspective, feeling like I was the odd one out in my family, since my whole family have dwarfism except for me. And so I thought it was a really relatable story to anyone who just feels like a black sheep of the family. So I had with the book a video component to where people can scan a QR code and then watch the book, the children's book, as they read it, as they see it with the characters. So I was just really intentional about casting, and he knows everyone. So I was like, hey.
That's so cool.
I'm glad you were able to have that community. It really speaks to the importance of that and be able to help each other in that way. Because Mark, you are a professional actor. You've been in TV shows and films. You've been in Modern Family and Mirror Mirror, the Snow White adaptation. We also watched on a podcast that you've been referenced as the George Clooney of Little People, not just because
What's that podcast? No, let's listen to that one again.
You don't know.
Yeah, not just because you're acting chops, because of your hair, which I think there's a lot of great hair here.
There's a lot of great hair on the set right now.
We're curious, working in that scripted space and now in this unscripted space, what has been the difference of the casting and the scripted shows versus, The Tallest Dwarf, which was actually directed by someone from the community?
This film was the first time I had been a part of a production that the creators had the condition rather than an outside source, even if it's a close friend of mine, sort of writing something or developing something that imagines what it must be like to be me and live with dwarfism. I think it shows through in the film about historically how rare it's been that we being the Little People community have agency in our own stories.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's something to be said about that. I mean, I'm a filmmaker, Lucky as well, and there's something about when you're in something or involved in something that is made by the community that it's for. It feels so intentional. It feels so empowering, and I think that really shines through in this documentary. Pete, on the flip side, you are an artist. You dominate the social space. You have 22 million subscribers on YouTube, which is no small feat. You deserve all the flowers for that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And we talked about your book a little bit already, but when we were doing research for this, I was surprised to learn that 80% of people with the most common form of dwarfism are also born to parents who don't have dwarfism. But your situation is kind of the opposite. So what was that like growing up for you?
I always say that I would feel like it's weird to have an average height family. Like to me, family equals dwarfism. Like, and so it was just so normal to me. Like, it's always weird for me to talk about because I'm like, what do you mean? You know? But yeah, I mean, definitely when I compare it to other kids I was growing up with, like, I would go over to their house and like the cups and plates were all like up high instead of down low. And I'm like, why are they up high? You know, like weird things like that, to where like I'm looking at my mom and dad eye to eye, and then everyone else is looking up. And I'm like, you know, when I was young, I was like, okay, no, there are kind of weird things that I know aren't necessarily like normal, but it felt normal. So I think now I can look back and be like, oh yeah, it's just like everyone else, but I just had it was a little bit more nuanced, you know?
And Mark, what about you? Because your parents and siblings are average size, which PBS learning moment, is that the right terminology? Should we be saying average size? What should we say?
Yeah, I mean, we use the term average. You all are really just sort of average, and we
We're you guys are
are non-average. Yes. But yes, that is the acceptable term. I get, you know, the normal thing you quoted is exactly right. Like feeling, what is normal? You know, what does that really mean, and why are we striving for normalcy anyway? Isn't that, to me, that strikes me as being uninteresting, being
boring.
normal.
Yeah, boring.
Yeah.
So, if you don't mind me asking, how did that affect you growing up, having the opposite experience that Pete had?
Well, I mean, you have your family, and it's all you know. And I have a great family. They were very supportive. They also didn't baby me or belittle me, no pun intended. I had to do everything everybody else did, and if I couldn't, after trying a few times, then I could ask for help. So I knew they helped me discover what my limitations were physically, and if there were any, and how to adapt. Adaptability is a huge part of our lives, and resiliency. And they taught me all those things. But there is something profound about, and this film speaks to it, about finding a new community, a new family that share a trait that you don't have in your family. You know, I'm imagining it would be a bit of a head turn when you would like hang out with all your friends as a kid, and then you come home to this dynamic that it isn't replicated anywhere else in the world. And that's how, when now I have a family, my wife is a little person, my kids are little people, and when we go out and people pay attention to us, it's so surprising because my life does feel very normal and very uninteresting. And then suddenly we are of complete interest to everyone else, and it's like, you're going to get bored really quick, you know, because there's not that much going on here, but we're fascinating to them.
Which kind of brings me into like what I want to shift our conversation into, which is about body image, which is also a huge theme in this film, and so relatable, I think, to literally anyone watching the film. There's that one scene where Julie is like rereading her handwritten journal from high school.
Goals: lose 25 pounds. Lose 21 pounds. Raise self-esteem.
Full transparency, so triggering. Like growing up, I also struggled with my body image. I think I still do. You know, I grew up biracial, so I have just something very different in a very white community going on. And so that really struck me. And I think, you know, I wanted to ask you, growing up, have you also struggled with body image? You know, Mark, what was that like for you growing up?
There may be, strangely, an advantage to being born so profoundly different, because comparisons were very few. You know, I didn't look like anyone else. I didn't move like anyone else. And so I built up in my own head the image that I thought I was displaying, and I didn't have any mirror to tell me that that was inaccurate, strangely, until I got to LPA. And then you walk into a room full of people just like you, and it's shocking because it's like, wait, I don't move like that. I don't look like that. I don't sit like that. And then you've also built an entire identity based on the package you're in, and everybody knows you as that. And then when you go to a place where everyone has that same package, you have to quickly pivot and figure out, well, who am I outside of being the little guy? That was a really big shift for me. And I think it does speak to, we work so hard to try to present as, again, normal or as like everyone else. And in fact, it's probably what makes you different innately that is actually the key to what's going to build the interesting, developed human that you'll become.
I love that. That's like I haven't had that frame of thinking before because I was conversely on the opposite side, being somebody that's different makes you feel different, and you're like, well, who am I? I want to be like everybody else. So you want to be.
So I felt too.
Yeah. So I really love the power in being different, like you explained. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's so great. And I really appreciate, like, I know I'm bringing back the film again, but I'm going to talk about the film. I love it. And I think, like, being able to watch this, like, journey of bodily acceptance by Julie through art and film and, even just experiencing different ways to express how your body moves was really empowering and just really, really cool to witness. But my other question is, like, how has been your experience of, like, finding that sense of belonging in your body?
Yeah, I think it's pretty much like the opposite of what you're saying. So, like, I mean, my mom has like videotapes of me literally saying, like, I want to be a dwarf. Like, why aren't I like you? Why can't I be normal? Why can't I? And she's like, no, you are. Like, you're like the one, like who can like not be looked at that way and who can like go into the world. But the way that I took it was, it just ate at me so much because I was never feeling like I was part of my own family. Like, we'd go to the grocery store and the clerk would like not remember me again, or like the doctor, and it's like, oh, my brother's having another surgery, and then I have to reintroduce myself at age like 7 again because I'm not part of this. Like, oh, you only family's here. It's like, well, I'm part of the family. Like, I'm, in a way, it's almost shaped who I am now because I think it was like 7 or 8 years ago where I finally was like, okay, I think I actually have like shed that need and want so badly that I felt like I just had to be like a little person. And I think I can actually, feel empowered now to like take a step back and be like, okay, yeah, who's this guy in this package who's like not just the tall guy, And so it's, really interesting to hear your view on it, because I'm like, yeah, I feel like it's so similar, but it's completely the opposite,
Was it hard for you? Suddenly, I'm taking over.
Take
now.
over.
Well, so let me ask you, Pete. Was it hard for you growing up because you're the youngest?
Yeah.
Did people like treat you to speak for the family? Like if you were out, because I get that, or I've gotten that my whole life, is that they'll always. This happens with disabilities all the time, where they'll talk to the caretaker instead of the person, or they'll talk to the taller person to speak for the adult, the younger person. Did you have that experience at all, where
No.
you were asked to be more representative of like what do they all think?
I mean, like, yes and no, but I think more so now, actually, like that my mom's getting older, we've had like more, medical things and stuff. It's like, I finding that, like, we've actually talked about that, my mom and I, when she's like sitting in the hospital bed. I'm like, he was looking at me the whole time, right? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, so I'll go out there and be like, hey, you gotta make sure you talk to, like, I'll be the person to like, we gotta make a difference about this, and be like annoying about it. But I've noticed it more as I've gotten older, actually. Yeah.
Body image was such a universal message in the film, and obviously people like us watching it and being like, wow, we relate to that part a lot as well. And then it was like, well, why do I feel this way about my body? And like, who's responsible for that? Like, big media? So like, like who?
But not PBS.
Yeah,
No, not us.
PBS. But it makes you, is media playing a role in that?
That's a perfect segue for the next conversation that I wanted to bring up with you guys. Yeah. I want to play you this TikTok sound.
How y'all doing?
Do Do you know that one?
I've never heard of that.
You've
in my life.
never
I'm
heard
kidding,
it?
of course. I think everyone. Do
Yeah.
you know?
Oh my God, I'm giving my age here, I think. Is that like a, I'm not even gonna guess. I should guess. Should I guess?
It's probably said by thousands of people and probably played in the videos like millions of
One
times.
of the top
it's
sounds.
like,
Yeah, it's one of the top songs on TikTok.
Is
It's
it from one of the Little Women shows?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It is.
Atlanta?
Little Women
Yeah,
Atlanta.
yeah.
Okay.
Got it.
Got my kids back. All right. All right.
You got the Riz. No, you know. My take is that I think Little People have had such a huge impact on pop culture, despite being a very small community. I recently learned there's only about 30,000 Little People in the US, which I had no idea. But like, I wanted to know if you agree with my take that despite being a small population, Little People have a huge impact on our culture.
I completely agree. I mean, you take that, you take Mini-Me, you take Oompa Loompas, you take the Munchkins, you take the elves, you take the dwarfs from Snow White. There are so many iconic imagery of people with dwarfism in the media that absolutely is non-representative of the amount of little people, but also non-representative of a person with dwarfism as well.
Right, right. But I mean, let's talk a little bit about some of those tropes you'd be happy to never see again on screen. Just anything that you would like, let's just kill it right now.
Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
It's always.
And that one to me it's as much about the voices as it is. It's phenomenal how often a little person's voice will be altered to manipulate it to make it sound less human. And the Munchkins are certainly, they are deliberately sound like non-human. And and I've always found it interesting that, at least in my career, and again, things are changing, but I don't have a problem personally with like the fantasy realm. That even the leprechauns and the elves and those sort of creatures, because I understand that they are fantasy. There's not nearly enough representation of the opposite, of the doctors, the lawyers, the husbands, the fathers, the criminals that just populate our society as little people. So we're relegated to these fantastical characters. It's nothing against them, but that's the only growing up. If that's the only representation you've seen, and you don't know a little person, then when you see one, you've attached all of this fantasy to that individual, and it's a burden that no one is asking for, and it's somewhat dehumanizing.
We have to add to that because that just reminded me of a story. One time in 7th grade, there was a kid who had that I made friends with at this new school, never seen a little person, and I'm like, I always forgot to tell people that my family were little people because I just don't think about it. And so we walked back to my house after school and I opened the door. I'm like, oh, it's my family. They're all sitting there in the living room. Like, oh, hey, hi, new friend. Nice to meet you. He was so shocked. He's like, I didn't even think it was real, like, or something like that. Like, he has never seen a little person. He thought it was actually fantasy because of movies. Mm-hmm. And he and I, we talked about it quickly at school the next day, and then we never talked again. It was like so awkward. Like, he was so like distraught from it,
Yeah.
Anyways,
Was that kind of the inspiration for that one TikTok video you have where you bring that friend? You're like, oh God, which one?
I'm like, oh God.
Yeah, I'm like, all of your feed. There's a one where you bring a friend over and he's like running around your house like, oh my God, this is so cool. Or like he's like Googling at everything.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
So many of those things.
We wanted to talk more about your content because you make content with your family and everyday life with them. Did that inspire like the content and kind of countering those negative stereotypes?
Yeah, so I think it's really interesting because when I first started posting and things, it was during quarantine, COVID baby, and I was with my mom, and she's like, Pete, people aren't ready for like little people to be on, like we're just gonna be made fun of. I'm not gonna do it if there are any bad comments. And I'm like, we can do it with nice comments. Like, it's all branding and marketing, Mom. Like, it's fine, And she's like, okay, well, as soon as I see the first bad thing, I'm out. And somehow, like, I think the way that we had started doing it, it was from such a place of being just human, and like it was more of like a love thing between, you know, like family instead of whimsical or like, you know, dehumanizing or something. For whatever reason, whatever we were doing was working, and I feel like a lot of people who hadn't seen Little People before, only see them in like fantasy films or didn't know what to think or whatever. Like I would start getting like so many DMs, and my mom would too, about like, I had no idea, like just the easiest things that you would think that people would just automatically know. They're just human. There's not that crazy to, you know, think about for me. But I really felt like it was just so positive, and we were doing it in a way that people were listening, or like getting through to the Gen Zs, you know, kind of a thing. Like, I don't know. It just felt like there was a hole in the market for that educational style, I guess.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Does any of that make
Edutainment.
sense?
Yeah, that makes
Edutainment.
tons of sense.
Okay.
It's very edutainment coded, which I love that space. I'm curious though, like what were some of those things that people were DMing? Like for those of us who wouldn't know, or maybe we do, but yeah.
I mean, it's been like everything from, oh, I didn't know that, like, if that's your mom, like, how is she still alive? Because I thought people who are dwarves would like die at like 40 something. And I'm like, where are you getting these stats? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Or like, how did your mom birth you? Or like, there's no way you're not adopted. Like, that's the one I still get to this day. It's like, there's no way like you're from your family. And I'm like, unless there's a milkman, but like there wasn't,
No,
you know?
Not the red.
So I mean, every kind of thing in my DMs, I would say. The coolest part though is that I get to meet so many people over DMs about like, who just had a child with achondroplasia, you know, and they've never known what that's like. And then I'd be like, talk to my mom, you know, because like, what am I gonna say? But like, it's really cool. I just feel like people have a home, you know, in some way.
Yeah. I want to go back to you saying that your mom said the world isn't ready for little people yet, like
Yeah.
on social media. And I think that's a little disheartening to hear that. And I'm curious now where you are with your content with her and how people have reacted. Where is she with that statement now?
Well, now she's like, why aren't you over? She's like, we have to film. She's like, let's go.
She runs a tight ship.
Exactly.
Curious for both of you, when was the first time you saw positive representation of someone with dwarfism on screen and media?
Oh, I feel like, I don't know. I feel like it's always been so stereotypical, like at least, you know, until lately, like we're at least like trying different things now, even though it's a mess, but at least like things are changing maybe. I don't know. What do you feel?
Yeah, for me it was, and there's very few examples for me growing up, but it was a film called Time Bandits that Terry Gilliam actually did. And there's a band of little people that are bandits, and they travel through time. And it's a great, fun film. And I just remember like the opening scene, I didn't know much about the movie. I was 8 or 9 or something. And this kid sleeping in his bed, and a knight and a horse come crashing through his armoire, and then behind it tumble out like 6 little people. They just had like full personalities, and they were sarcastic, and they felt like real men, as opposed to like the dwarves from Snow White that are completely asexual and are infantilized, and or like the Oompa Loompas who are all made to dress and look exactly alike and have no personality. And the Munchkins, it was always just, it was a group. And this was a group, but they were all individuals, like Ocean's 11, you know, it was Ocean's 6.5 instead. And so that blew my mind. I was so excited. And that was made me say like, hey, not only do I see myself on screen, but I could do what they're doing as an actor.
Yeah, that's so cool. I mean, I think that just goes back to the power of representation, because if you can see yourself, you can see yourself there, which is incredible. I have been thinking about reality TV. I mean, I played you the Little Women of Atlanta clip at the top, and I'm not gonna name names specifically, but I used to work on a few reality shows that were about little people. And I feel like it was just a little murky sometimes. You know, on one hand, it was incredible to be able to just have like this representation on screen that felt like just normalizing kind of like this group of people. are all little people, but they also have all their lives, and this is what we're doing. We're following them around. But then sometimes it did feel a little, a little icky, a little exploitative. Lucky and I were talking about it earlier, and we were kind of just like, I mean, I think this is true for all of it, but is reality TV just like the new circus? Like, are we all just kind of watching other people's lives for entertainment in the same way we would have back in the day at the circus? I don't know what you guys think about that.
Yes.
You're like, and yes.
All right, moving on. No.
And we're done. No.
I do feel like there is that element. And although, conversely, being involved in Little People of America and being president, there were more than a few times that people found the community, the Little People of America community, through even some of the less savory reality shows that had dwarf representation. And so in a sense, it's that sort of like, is there, all publicity is good publicity, or there's no bad publicity. In a way that exposure, even something if my cup of tea is not Little Women of Atlanta, but at the same time, look, you've got all these Real Housewives of wherever, and they're acting, throwing champagne glasses at each other and sleeping with everybody and acting like lunatics. We can be throwing champagne at each other and acting like lunatics too. We're just like you. It's not like, if you're able to sort of sell yourself out like that, why can't we? Now, it's a little more nuanced than that, of course, because there is that aspect of voyeurism. Like, I'm watching it because they're all little people too, and I get that. So it's complicated, but the exposure has been profound with the explosion of the reality TV, and really brought a lot of people awareness. However circuitously you had to go through to get to that point, more so than Billy Buddy was on all kinds of TV shows representing great, and just a microcosm of that audience. That ends up on seeing clips on YouTube or seeing, shows on reality TV.
It feels like something that I can't really talk about, honestly, because like I'm not a little person, and I feel like it's such a nuanced thing to where like I don't know.
Yeah.
But I will say like I don't agree with it.
Everything we've been talking about reminds me of a line from the film, which we want to play. It's from Sophia and the director, Julie, when they're conversing.
It's just so
Why do you
important.
think it's needed more and more?
Well, I think that we are a community that is invisible, but always on display. We're invisible in the sense of like sitting on a chair or trying to navigate a kitchen, the architecture of our spaces, the way the world works. They're not thinking about people that are 5 feet and below.
You are not expected. We are not,
However, we'll just stare all day. It's always like, oh,
Yeah.
good for you.
It's so like
Wow, you're
patronizing.
and it's like,
fetishizing and
yeah.
But I also really believe that images can also shake up those exact things, and can like knock them down.
Right.
Like I really think that.
I agree.
Absolutely, 100%. She nails it so succinctly that I was talking about that one of the reasons I became an actor, I think, is because every time I'd walk out of my house as a kid, I was on display. I was on stage. Whether, going to the grocery store, I was performing for others, whether I wanted to or not, because everybody was staring. And the first time I got on stage where I controlled to some degree how you looked at me and why you laughed or why you smiled or why you looked away, and that was in my power, and the laughs and the applause didn't hurt. But that was so empowering to me to finally reclaim the thing I had been feeling my whole life, and to have ownership of it. And Sophia's exactly right. It is, but at the same time, like I was sort of referencing to you, is that we are pushed aside, diminished. We're people stand in front of me in line, they just don't see me, which is an indictment on how we treat kids too, because I'm the size of a child, and it's like, oh, he doesn't matter. I'm not even going to acknowledge him. I'm just going to walk in front of you. Or the reactions you get because you happen to just exist in the world. They're reactions of diminishing and making someone invisible.
Well, one of the other big themes, aside from body image and everything we talked about, was medical intervention and people grappling with medical intervention for dwarfism, either for themselves or for their kids.
Because now, you can test for dwarfism during pregnancy. I have a friend actually who's going through similar genetic testing just to see that, because she has this gene in her family, and she's just like, I'm curious. And we had this conversation, like, what does it really matter, or have you ever been curious, things like that.
Okay, yeah. So what specifically, like about if I carry the gene or about
Or
if,
like, have you ever wanted to do genetic testing? Have you done it? Yeah.
Yes, so I have, and I actually am a donor. So I have like 72 offsprings, and none of them have dwarfism. So I'm like, okay, there's like a, kind of a case study here where I was told my whole life, that like I don't have the gene or whatever. But I'm like, well, between my mom's type, which is pseudoachondroplasia, and my dad's achondroplasia, I'm like, who really knows, if there is a gene tucked away back in there? So yeah.
And it's also a difference between recessive and dominant gene in the sense that not all, but the most common type achondroplasia and pseudoachondroplasia are both, if I'm not mistaken, they're genetic mutations that occur when, the fetus or everything's coming together. We won't do a lesson on how that all happens, but so then you can, because it's a dominant gene, then you will carry it on. I carry mine, my wife carries hers, so our children are little people. You are as likely to have a dwarf baby as you are an audience member who has never met a little person before, whatever. So then there are recessive genes that carry on and skip generations and that sort of thing. But I think it is something that is most 80%, like you said, of dwarves are born to average-type parents. It's a surprise, always, or almost 80% of the time, that you're having a dwarf baby.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I mean, I appreciated also in the film that there was different perspectives from the LP community and the medical intervention. We also got to see from Chandler, who chose to do leg lengthening
That sense
surgery.
of knowing there was a different way you wanted to be.
I had always felt like I was just never in the body I was meant to be in.
What are some specific moments when you're like, now I'm in this body that feels right?
After my lengthenings, I realized I was treated more my age because I looked my age. I'm able to drive without adaptations in a car. And, I could walk a busy city street without worrying about being trampled over. Every time I go into a changing room and I can put on a pair of pants that falls where it should fall, it's just one of those things where it's just like, wow. Like, I just love looking in the mirror at it.
So we're curious on what your take on from that clip is.
For me, there's different nuances. What Chandler is talking about, she did those surgeries when she was in high school. So her level of awareness and agency is in there. Now there are these pharmaceutical interventions that they inject once a day, and another one's coming up that'll be once a week. That seems more appealing for people who do that for obvious reasons. And you start at basically as a newborn or 6 months old or 2 years old. And so these average type parents who have no experience with dwarfism other than what they've likely seen in media representation, because chances are they're not friends or family members of a person with dwarfism. And they're making decisions about their child's futures and bodies and identity and culture based on a doctor's analysis who has no experience in dwarfism and what they see in the media or what they've digested in the media. And it'd be one thing if at 35 years old, you could decide to take this injection. Then, that's a different conversation. But when average height parents who don't have the condition are giving it to their child, there's a lot of conversation about what is the purpose of it? Who are you doing this for?
Like even my mom was forced to take growth hormones when she was a little kid, and she's taller than what she's supposed to be, but that's why her wrists and arms are bent because of the growth hormones. So I'm like, okay, what are we gonna see, years down the line? Like, are we sure this is safe? I just don't know enough, but.
Yeah, but we're in an era of, I guess, looks maxing or whatever you could call it, where this feels like the time period where people are caring the most about how they look online, and just be you. Just look how you want to look. Doesn't matter. But
We were talking about that conversation of just like medical interventions, and I don't think we're supposed to be seeing all these people on social media and the way that they look and like comparing ourselves the way that we are exposed to today. And I feel like that plays into those nuances that you're mentioning. It's a wide conversation.
that makes me think though, and like kind of want to ask you a question, like, how is it moving through the world? Like, what are some of the biggest challenges that you have or your family has?
I mean, it can be as sort of life-threatening as Chandler mentions, crossing the street. I mean, trucks are like so ridiculously huge right now. Even, shorter average height people are below like the hood level. And so there's a real risk. A friend of mine, a little person 15 years ago or something, was killed crossing the street because a car didn't see him.
And again, like 4 months ago to someone else.
Is that right? Yeah, it's a real thing. So there's that. And then there are, this chair. It's a beautiful chair. It doesn't fit me the way it fits you. I don't necessarily want a tiny little chair while you are always sitting like that. But, there are ways that you can adapt things. There are chairs that are made for little people. And so clothes are a big issue. I need a lift in my shoe. I can buy a pair of shoes for $50. And then I spend $100 putting the lift on it. It's, those are little ticky-tack things, but they do add up to become like, well, wait a minute. I'm feeling something here. I'm feeling like nobody's really built this for me. Wait a minute.
Yeah, it's not adding up. Yeah. I mean, even Chandler was saying, like, in the fitting room where she was like, I can finally put on a pair of pants that like fall where they're supposed to fall. That is something like, I guess, like, I had this reaction to it immediately where I was just like, yeah, like that, I think for her was so empowering and so important. But I also am like, we should be serving more people to have that experience.
Wouldn't it be a lot easier to change a pair of jeans than to change the body of a human?
I think so. Yeah, I think so, exactly.
We've asked you a ton of questions, but we want to give y'all the floor now. And we're curious, what questions do you want to be asked, or what questions have you not been asked before?
I mean, I think what I'm not asked is what's great about being a little person, Like, I'm getting emotional thinking about it because without it, there are so many people that I would not have met and connected with. And I wouldn't have a viewpoint of society that is unique and full of empathy and a willingness to allow and adapt that there are a lot of differences in the world, and that's part of why this world thrives, is because of all of the genetic mutations that then turn out to be really fabulous, or they're fine, like they're adjustable, and so I've gotten to live a really interesting life. I never had to work hard to be noticed. So a lot of people work really hard, as we're talking about, to be noticed. And I always had that whenever I wanted it. So I would argue that, like, man, I feel like my life would be really boring if I were 5'10".
Yeah.
Yeah, it is pretty boring.
Are you 5'10"?
Yeah, but 5'9.5". But that is a really beautiful, again, like mindset and frame of thinking that I feel like I'm going to carry with me.
Yeah, thanks
Yeah.
for sharing that with us. Yeah.
What about you, Pete?
I would say everyone is always looking at the visuals of everything. No one's ever kind of piggybacking on, what you're saying about empathy and stuff. It's like, yeah, your life, and I feel like in ways my life have made me more, empathetic, and I can, like, there are definitely a lot of positives about, being a part of a community like this. And I think that people don't pry into that. They instead just look at what's different, you know, and they ask those kind of questions instead of like kind of taking a step back and, well, how are they feeling about this emotionally? Like there are not as many conversations about the emotional part of being a little person or the surrounding members.
Yeah. Is there anything else that we didn't talk about that you would like to talk about, or anything you want to add? I always love to leave some time for that at the end.
Watch the film.
Yeah.
Thank you both so much for joining us. Like, honestly, best conversation that we could have had about this film, and just so happy that you were here with us today. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You. Thank you so much again to our wonderful guests and to viewers like you. This is our very first episode, and we can't wait to bring you more PBS films that leave you just a little bit smarter.
The Tallest War from Independent Lens is available right now. We'll put a link in the description below. Go and watch it and let us know what you think. We'll be here waiting for your comments, and we might even lurk over there a little bit too.
And come back, because next time on Film Club, we're gonna be talking about one of the all-time greats of the natural world. Think you know who it is? Let us know in the comments.
See you later.
Ciao.